Hey, Matt, I'm here. Can you give me the permission to record?
I have to give you permission to record?
Yeah, I just hit the record button. It says need permission to record. I don't think I'm a panelist.
Try it now. You are a panelist.
Okay, I'm recording now.
Thank you, sir.
Have fun.
Always.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Kurt, can you turn off the recording? Is he still there?
I record too. Kurt backs it up. We just keep it.
I'm having a technical issue, but I'm not going to say it over the recording.
Okay, I'll stop and start again.
After we stop, then I'll forget. I'll get in the going, and then I won't hit record. So,
Why don't you send it in the chat, Jean?
do you need help with something? Want to call me? Call me.
Matt, you want me to stop recording or not?
Is this something Kurt or I can help with?
She's muted all the way, Matt. Stay with it or let it drop it for a minute.
I don't want to stop it because then I get nervous because then I don't hit record again.
All right.
Oh,
Okay, keep recording, she just said. So I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going to mute myself. Have a nice meeting, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Barry.
Feels a bit like New England weather with all this snow.
You're used to it, huh, Dan?
I am, but I've been down here for a long time now.
I know you have. How far outside? I think I asked you this. How far outside of Boston did you grow up?
I grew up actually in the city of Boston. Yeah, section called West Roxbury,
Hmm.
which is sort
Right
of
next to my hometown.
next to Debbie.
Yep.
Is that right? That's a great city to visit.
Mm-hmm.
It
Uh, I mean, it really is a great city to visit. I spent 4 days there. They were at the golf club that I play. My God, my grandsons, they're sophomores in college now, but I'm going to say 10 years ago, there was a young woman who had significant breast cancer, and they had a fundraiser, and I bought a bunch of tickets for it. And if you won, you were able to go spend the weekend in Boston, and you received Phillies and the Boston Red Sox tickets behind home plate. So I happened to win. I bought a lot of tickets, but I won. And I took my twin grandchildren and my wife, and we went to Boston for 4 days. I stayed at the hotel on the wharf. And then my grandson and I went to the baseball games. My wife and granddaughter went to the various, we had a great time. Dinner. I mean, it was just wonderful. And getting around on the tube, they don't call it the tube, the subway, easy to do. And it was really, the North End. I mean, it was just a great 4 days to do all the visitations. It's a nice city to visit. I liked it.
Particularly in the summer.
I think we're all here. Peter had a work emergency and will be joining us at 7. So should I read the welcome? Do I need to? Is there anyone here that's actually not on?
Oh, there's a couple members of the public. Let's go ahead.
Okay.
Formalities. I'll
Would
start.
you like me to start, Matt?
Yep.
You ready?
That'd be great.
Okay, welcome to this public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We are always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items on the published agenda or other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We desire that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community. Thank you for attending.
As required under the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 1046 et sequentia, adequate notice was given for calling this meeting. It was authorized by the Board of Education and forwarded to municipal clerk, Princeton Packet and the Times on January 13th, 2021, and distributed to the schools and others on the standard distribution list. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. Board Policy 2230, recording devices, requires that we inform those attending this virtual Zoom meeting that the proceedings are being recorded. This meeting is not being live streamed. Public members who wish to make comment at the appropriate time, as noted in the agenda or added by the presiding officer, shall quote unquote raise their hand virtually at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Once called upon, the members of the public, the member of the public will be requested to unmute themselves by clicking the mute button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We are not having any action items, so I don't need to read the last paragraph about the votes of the sending district.
Okay, Matt, would you like to take the roll?
Beth Barron,
Here.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Here.
Dan Dart,
Here,
Betsy Baglio,
Here.
Brian McDonald,
present.
Michele Tuck-Ponder,
Present.
Dafna Kendal,
Here.
Susan Kanter,
Here.
Dean Durbin.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I think that takes us to the matter of the meeting, the business of the night, which is the budget priorities. And I would just note, Matt, that we have a public comment in here as well. So if we do go into a closed session, Barry, we should think about how we handle the public comment.
Okay. All right. So why don't we begin? Tonight's meeting was basically for us as administrators to listen to the board members with regard to your goals and objectives for this upcoming school budget. Also, we want to do that as a first order priority. And then we would like to give you an analysis of where we believe the current budget stands. And I'll make just a couple of comments about that. Matt's been working very hard on that. Unfortunately, we had a computer crash over the weekend, and we just got Systems 3000 back up and running again today. So we have an analysis, I would say, based on about 70% of our budget. So we will make some, comments with regard to Matt's work. Matt will do that. And for next week, basically, we want to take your comments and we want to be able to have a complete analysis for you, in addition to a first draft of what we're talking about with regard to budgets and how we're going to proceed from there. So I think, Beth, the appropriate thing would be for us to hear from the board members with regard to specific goals and objectives that they would like the administration to work on and try to achieve in the upcoming budget cycle.
Okay. I think Daphne and I had spoken to everyone here separately and kind of talked about this a little bit, but I guess this is the opportunity for people to kind of speak their mind and talk about their priorities and things that we want to make sure are covered in the budget.
And just to add, that list was compiled. It will be going out to the board, but it was shared with Barry and Beth. So Barry does have
Right.
everyone's, in total, everyone's priorities.
Yeah, Matt has that. We shared it with Matt, and so we do have those priorities. We also have collected questions that Beth put together, and in addition to that, we have questions that Brian submitted to Matt and I to consider. So let's open the conversation, and then we can weave these questions, and Matt can answer some of the technical questions and some of the budget issues that we'll be dealing with.
So I'll go if no one else wants to go first, but I put together goals and submitted them to Beth and Daphne, and certainly getting our schools open full time would be at the top of my list. I think our kids are suffer. And certainly the younger kids and the special ed kids, I would place a higher priority on. And although the hybrid model is better than the remote model, I'm hoping that for as close to normal as we can get. So that would be number one on my list in terms of priorities. Number two would be robust summer programs that hopefully we could use to make up for any deficits. I think the sooner we begin to talk about those and plan for those, the better. And I'm not sure that, I don't know where my document went, but so those are two, I guess, student achievement related goals that I would have, which would be, at the top of the list. And then maybe I come back to sort of financial goals and other goals.
Okay. I don't know how you want to do this, Beth. Do you want us to comment on these, or would you just like to have the board all have an opportunity to speak and then make some general comments with regard to the questions that are posed, or some comments with regard to what we're doing with regard to Dan's suggestions and ideas?
Well, my sense is after speaking to everyone with Dafna that actually with Dan has kind of hit the top two that we've got.
Yeah.
Maybe we could hear from you on them and then we can add to it. Does that sound good to everyone else? Okay, because I think that is really, I think the board generally shares those concerns. Obviously, we want to get schools open again and get back to normalcy as much as possible to serve the children. And then we're all concerned with the summer programs to try to figure out how to make up for all the losses and the deficits or the needs that we have.
Well, I think they're two laudable goals, because I think everybody wants the kids to be back in school full time in September. And some of the things that we're doing is, we began the school year with a phase in and a phase up. It was fairly successful for us for a long period of time. We very rarely had to close our schools because of quarantining or COVID. We're now in a position of ramping up. In fact, tomorrow morning, I'll be meeting with Bob and our junior and senior high administrative staff. We want to increase instructional time, direct instructional time for both. And we want to be, we sent a survey out to parents who may be on the call, and we're looking for data to come back on Friday, because we would like to combine cohorts A and B, and we'd like to do that sooner than later. So combining cohorts A and B, then at the middle school, where that's not possible because of the physical space requirements of the reopening plan, we would want to increase the direct instructional time. So the high school and the middle school have to have the same schedule, so we'll adjust for them both to provide for more direct instructional time by almost 20%. We are also planning, one of the challenges with that is lunch. You expand instructional time another 20%. Now kids are in school for a long period of time and they need to eat. So we're working on a plan, and I'll have that after I meet with them tomorrow. We will put that out for the board to review. But April 1, when we're able to reconstruct all of our tents, we will have outdoor eating spaces so that the kids can socially distance. It'll be a heck of a lot easier for us to provide that lunch opportunity for youngsters, or a snack opportunity for youngsters. It also gives us an opportunity for the arts. In addition to that, I talked to Pat Lenahan today. We submitted a proposal to Dr. Helmrich. We want to start increasing the opportunities for our arts youngsters to come in. So 2 ensembles. Patrick has put together a plan to bring 2 ensembles for rehearsals after school hours into the senior high school. We want to be able to do that and provide kids opportunities. So as we move forward, we are increasing the number of instructional hours, direct instructional hours, and we're also trying to combine and get kids into school more often. In addition to that, Mickey Crisafulli, our special education director, is working with both Jared, our acting principal, and Jason, our junior high principal, and Bob. And we should be able to bring back all of our special education kids. Instead of flip-flopping, they should be able to come back 8 out of the 10 days in our hybrid model. So we're moving towards the goal that the board wants us to achieve. It's just a question of physical space. It's a question of staffing, and it's a question of timing. As soon as the weather breaks, it'll make it a lot easier for us because it gives us a lot more options with regard to outside. You know, if a youngster's going to be in school for 5 hours of direct instruction, well, passing time, it's almost 6 hours. They're going to need to eat something. They'll also need mass breaks, and that can only be accomplished by being outside and doing different things. So the weather will determine a lot of this. But we believe that, you know, we have an opportunity to potentially increase this direct instructional time over the next couple of weeks as we begin our second semester of school. That was always our idea, that we would come in, study our protocols, make sure our protocols are working. And for the public that's on the call tonight, we'll have a dashboard up tomorrow, and the dashboard will be tracking all of our COVID cases. And if I'm not mistaken, the last number that I saw, we had 60 COVID cases since opening school on Labor Day. And none of the cases were transmitted in school. They all happened to be cases where either youngsters were playing in club programs, or parents were working, or siblings were visiting back from college, or household members had guests from other places. We have, to my knowledge, we do not have one transmission that originated in one of our schools. So our protocols are working. We're following the science. We're following Dr. Helmer's recommendations, Dr. DeFernando's recommendations, and the Princeton Health Department's recommendations. They've been very good at what we're attempting to do. We've been very successful in athletics. We've had a fall athletic season. We have a winter athletic season, and we're going to have a spring athletic season. So now we want to make sure that we have an arts season. We want to make sure that our clubs can meet virtually. And as I indicated before in the fall, if a club or an advisor wants to meet in person, all they have to do is submit a protocol to be approved by a building administrator that it meets the social distancing requirements and all, so that we can make school this spring, winter and spring, as natural as it possibly can. So I'm just giving you the broad strokes of what we're doing, but as you know, you all be informed over the next week or two on how we plan to implement that and the changes that are going to be necessary for us to accomplish these objectives. But Dan, your objectives are our objectives. And as Beth said, they were the top two of the entire board. There are our objectives. Kids need to get back to school. Yep. To that end, the public ought to also know that the board was gracious enough to purchase an indemnification policy for all of our nurses. And we now pretty much have that in place so that they will be assisting the Princeton Health Department in vaccinating the members of the community. But in addition to that, when the vaccines become available for our staff, we have submitted a site plan under the direction of the Princeton Health Department where our high school will be utilized, and our nurses then will be indemnified, so they'll be able to inoculate our staff and their families, so that teachers will feel more comfortable coming into our schools, and we will be able to provide more direct instruction. The governor is going to have to work with us because he's going to have to relax some of the social distancing requirements, because we can't make the classrooms any larger than they are. That's what they are. So, you know, you can only handle so many youngsters under the current guidelines. So as more people are vaccinated, I'm hoping that they're going to revisit the reopening plan, and it may provide more opportunities for us to bring more youngsters back as teachers are vaccinated, as our staff is vaccinated, and the general public is vaccinated. So I'll stop there and answer any questions you have, but that's basically our approach. Try to vaccinate our people, try to increase instructional time, try to make our staff feel comfortable by coming in. And the fact that we've been so transparent since the beginning of September, I think our staff trust us. we're going to tell you every time we have a case of COVID. COVID is dangerous. COVID is very significant, and staff and students and parents have a right to know what's going on in our schools. So that's why we created this dashboard. Every time there's a case, there's a dashboard, and parents can see where it's at, what school, and whether or not it was a faculty member or a student, et cetera.
Barry, I just have a question. Thank you for everything you're doing to get our kids back into school more and make it as normal as possible. Has there been any consideration about at the middle school level to do something to engage the kids there in the spring?
Yeah,
after school?
There has been, Daphne. And the reason we didn't do that in the fall is because of the social distancing requirements. We were using elementary fields, middle school fields, and the senior high school fields just to operate a varsity athletic program, because we needed to social distance all the kids all over our athletic fields. So as I say, I think in the spring, if more and more people are vaccinated, there may be some relaxation with regard to some of the protocols that we currently have in place. I'm hoping so. And if that's the case, there's no reason why. I mean, Brian wanted to run an intramural program at the middle school in the fall. Well, we just didn't have the physical space to do it and keep our athletes safe. And we didn't want to have the integrity of our academic program scuttled because we weren't following the social distancing requirements.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian? Brian, you're on mute.
Yeah, just to stay on the two topics that Dan mentioned that we all feel so strongly about. With respect to the summer, Barry, it could be a significant number of students that we want to spend time with. Many people feel that students across special ed, general ed, have fallen behind. And I think we all think it's our duty to do everything we can to, bring them, make sure that the progress, continues and we can catch up. There may be federal stimulus, there may be state funds. In the past, we've had donors and foundations that have supported us. But as you and Matt construct the budget for next year, I just hope that you will err on the side of caution to make sure that it's certain that we can do what we all want to do during the summer.
Oh, yeah, and to that point, and thanks for the question. We're Bob and our people are already looking at that particular issue, and I'm hoping by the February board meeting that Bob will be able to give us some broad strokes about how we're going to assess the students who may have had learning loss. We also want to assess some learning gains that's going to come out of executive function and self motivations and so forth and so on. The kids have been forced to learn because of the remote learning. But three things that are happening. A, this budget analysis. We want to see exactly where we are at with this current year budget and projections with regard to whether or not we're going to have a surplus or a deficit. Two, Valerie already submitted a $156,000 grant that would go towards the funding of that summer program that you're speaking about. In addition to that, we also have some excess Title I funds for youngsters who qualify under Title I. So there's a package of dollars. There'll be Title I dollars. Hopefully there'll be grant dollars. Hopefully there'll be individual funder dollars. And then I would imagine, based on what the need is assessed at in the budget that we put together for it, there may be some local funds that will be utilized to do exactly what you and Dan and the rest of the board think are the two top priorities for the district. So that's our thinking. That's where we're going with it. We recognize, you're going to be hiring a new leader in the next coming weeks or months, whatever it happens to be. And we would want to put together a plan so that when that person takes over, they'll be able to have a plan for the reopening of 21 and a summer program that's robust enough to remediate some of the issues that we know are going to occur because of these difficult times. Remote learning is great. Problem is, kids are under stress. Parents have issues. is just not the same as regular in-person learning where youngsters are nurtured and cared for by individual teachers and staff on a daily basis. We know that. I can tell you the traffic, and when I wrote the letter a week and a half ago, the traffic that we're getting through our guidance departments tells us everything we need to know with regard to the social and mental health of kids. So we know as dangerous as the virus is just as dangerous being home and not being in school and interfacing with teachers and your peers.
One of Brian's points that he brings up is one of my favorite financial budgeting points, is that the difference between non-recurring and recurring expenses. Something like that is a non-recurring expense that's going to go directly to the benefit of the kids, and it's a no-brainer, not being that we have infinite funds to put there, but it makes it much easier to use some of the savings to immediately put that towards helping the kids that are most in need recoup some of that lost learning.
Michelle, I see you have your hand.
I do, thank you. I am actually going to put my colleague Dan Dart's hat on and talk a little bit about data, because one of the things, I think we've talked about this in the past, is that as a board, we seek to make data-based decisions. And one of the things that certainly, which is one of the challenges for me, is knowing what data do I need? Is it put together in a way that's going to support our decision-making as a board from a policy perspective? And so, again, this may not necessarily be a budgetary issue, but it's something that is of critical importance, at least for me, and I think for all of us at the committee level and at the full board level, is that we have data presented to us that tells a story, and that has someone who can stand behind that data and explain to us what the impact is and what it needs. And especially as we approach the whole learning loss issue, and we say we're going to dedicate resources to summer programs. How are we going to know how many kids have learning loss? How many programs do we need? What about the kids who, for example, haven't had learning loss and are still expecting to take courses that are going to advance them academically? But having that data presented to us in a way that will help us and aid and support our decision making would be terrific. My other budgetary question would be around equity. And everybody's tired of hearing me say we got 28 equity programs and we're still struggling. I guess I would love to look across the landscape of these programs and look at how much are we paying for this? Like, how much is it costing us? And are the outcomes, do they justify the expenses? And whether or not we can do some analysis around that and figure out what programs are most effective, what kind of outcomes do we want, and then have a budget number that specifically addresses equity, and so we know what we're spending and we know what our expectations are in terms of outcomes.
Yeah, I think they're both valid questions and valid points. Actually, Bob is talking to our assessment people and trying to figure out exactly how we're going to assess learning loss, because I think that's a difficult question. There aren't many standardized kinds of instruments to use. So, the best and probably has always been is teacher observation with regard to kids and doing an assessment. I mean, teacher observation is really an important data point. In addition to that, there are different kinds of assessments that I think they'll use to develop that program. And around your equity question, I think that's a great question. And when we talk about potential administrative reorganization, I had this conversation yesterday with our new equity chairs, Betsy and Debbie. And my point is that Princeton offers, your academic offerings are phenomenal. Okay, so the key for me, if I were here long term, the key for me is how to make sure that my youngsters pre-K to 5 are prepared to access that diverse, wide academic offerings. Because the reality is if I'm not prepared and on grade level in reading and mathematics, language arts, by the time in 5th grade, I'm not going to be able to access that program. I'm not going to be able to participate in those advanced courses or the electives. I'm going to be in some other kinds of programs. The other thing that the reason I mention that is because a number of youngsters will become special education youngsters based on the fact that they're not achieving at the necessary levels that we want them to achieve. So the focus for me would be pre-K to 5 and saying, okay, what are the skills? What capacities do we need to build in our staff? What is the plan? How do we measure that plan? And how do we make sure, and how do we say to parents in the Princeton community, parents, if you're with us for 5 and 6 years and there's really no great mobility, if you give us your children, we want to be sure that they're able to access this whole cadre of offerings that this district offers. And it's impressive and it's wide and varied. But the kids that you're talking about, Michelle, never get a chance to participate in that.
I know.
So for me, that focus has to be pre-K1 and there. And that's the focus for me. Because I think I've told this story to Beth and a few of you others, and very quickly, because I don't want to waste your time tonight, but I was in an urban school district and I said to our people, let me ask you a question. If kids are with us K1, 2, and 3, what's our percentage of kids that are below grade level in reading and mathematics and language arts? They didn't know. We did the data point, just as you pointed out, right? And you know what we found out? That if kids were with us for 4 years, 97% of those kids were on grade level. Our issue was we had a 30% mobility rate. Now, you don't have a 30% mobility rate in Princeton. There isn't a 30% mobility rate. We have to find out what that mobility rate is. Then the second piece is that, okay, if you don't have a 30% mobility rate, then why can't kids at the end of 5th grade be on grade level in reading, mathematics, and language arts? What supports do we need to build to make sure that they are?
And I think that's data that the board should know. We should know what is our percentage of kids who are on a grade level in 2nd grade, 3rd grade. We should know. We should understand that information.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I don't disagree with that. But as I say, when you look at budget, there's an academic side to budget, and then there's a moral side to a budget, and then there's a financial side to it. Okay, so there's 3 pieces, and in order for this to work, all of them have to mesh.
budget is a value statement of your values and what
Correct.
you think is important. Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Betsy?
I would just add 2 related things. One, I'm very concerned about, again, we're all aligned on this. I think learning loss, though, it will not just be remediated in the summer. I'd like to make sure we think about after school programs throughout the year, whether they're virtual or in person. Obviously, we need to get kids back to school, to a full day of school as quickly as possible, but let's not think that by August 31st, we will have solved this issue. So what can we do throughout the year to support these students? The other thing is, as far as figuring out how to measure this, every school district in the country, everyone, well, they should be doing this. And so this is a time, I think, let's put our heads together, whether our Mercer County colleagues through the roundtable, Barry, that you're a part of, or we're a member of the Tri-State Consortium. And I know that they're doing some work. I read an article, I used to teach in Westport, Connecticut. I read an article there about how they're working with Tri-State. I think it was more of a survey for parents, but perhaps someone like Tri-State is already trying to tackle some of this. And Tri-State is a group of like districts to us. So I would just say, even, we may pay a little bit for that, but it would be great to have.
Yeah, and Bob, you want to comment here because Bob participates.
Yeah, I meet with them once a month, and that actually is going to be February's agenda.
Oh, that's great. Perfect. Thanks.
I just want to add for the summer programs, we talk about learning loss, but there's also kids who have been affected in other ways, whether mental health status or kids who have been very isolated. So I hope when we, so for me, this is budget, dreams today, but I hope we have the resources to do things that will bring kids together outside of learning loss. Like, for example, is it possible for there to be a week of baseball, intramurals that's run by the district and our teachers do it? Is it possible to have like a week of Algebra 1 review, a week of Algebra 2 review, and it's just open to anyone who would like that? And also, like, and I just want to reiterate with regard to special ed. So typically there's the ESY program, it's 3.5 weeks, it's half days, and it's really for the most disabled kids. And so I would like to know, like, what else can we do to bring in every special ed kid, and the ones who need the most work, the most help, that we're bringing them in for 7 weeks and full days, if that's possible. So I would like to know how big we can go this summer, and learning loss is important for those kids that we can quantify it for, but also to have like kind of, something to bring everyone back together, and get the kids interacting again. So it falls outside of the learning loss, but I think it's important.
Beth, may I just follow up on something? We started looking today at the results of the survey we did for elementary school kids. And one of the things we found, because we asked some questions about some of the things you're addressing, Dafna, in terms of social emotional well-being and so forth. And we found that most people said that the kids have been able to maintain friendships that they had before, whether in person or by Zoom. And almost all of them said their kids have not been able to make new friends. So I think that is something that we do need to follow through on.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Brian?
I know I sent Barry and Matt information, and I won't go over all of that, but I wanted to wonder about 3 things that I would hope would be priorities. The first is to sustain and enhance our efforts to attract, hire, and retain as diverse a group of teachers and staff as possible. And I know that we're making progress there, but I also know it requires a lot of work across the board, from the recruiting, the networking, the search process, the onboarding, ensuring that we're a welcoming community, skill development, and anything else related to retention. And so I guess my question is whether we're able to do this inside of our existing budget, or whether it is worth having a conversation about some supplement to make sure that we can, to the full extent possible, succeed in having teachers and staff who reflect the diversity of our schools and of our community. I'll pause and then I give you the other 2.
Well, I think the board has been very clear since I've been here, and I know before I've been here as I transitioned, what your goals are with regard to staffing. And I think Mike has done a really good job of outreaching, not only to people who are ready to become teachers or administrators, but he has even reached out into the community and talking to high school youngsters about a career in education, and promising them that if they did pursue a career, that they could come back here and be guaranteed of an interview for positions that are here. We've engaged the community, Not in Our Town group, Civil Rights Commission, a PTOC, and said to them, you're now deputized, so to speak, to be recruiters for us. Bring us high quality people, relatives, friends, associates, people that you know who are in the education field, who are a diverse pool, and provide them, the opportunity for them to apply to the Princeton School District, and we will be sure that they are in the interview pools. So I think the administration understands loud and clear what the objective is, and what we're doing now is outreaching to community people. I've always found that to be I've done a lot of research, a lot of outreach to schools and so forth, universities and college, I found my best resources were churches, were community groups, were people who were in the community outreaching to the people that they know and using their resources and networking and bringing candidates to me. I've always found that to be the most successful. And to be quite honest with you, I've gotten great candidates and wonderful professionals over my career doing that way. And that's exactly the model Mike's using, in addition to the traditional routes of colleges and universities.
So Barry, the other two, I'll give them to you both at the same time. You have really worked hard on communications, internal communications and external communications, and identified a need there, feeling that we were under-resourced. And you have adjusted an internal staff position and hired an external consultant. And so I just want to hope that whether it's through internal resources or a combination of internal resources and consultants, that as a district, we retain that commitment to communication. And while a lot of our communication has been focused on the pandemic, I think there are still a lot of opportunities for us to do a better job of communicating with our families, and with our community. And the second is on the topic of sustainability. In 2018, the district made a major commitment as part of a community-wide effort to develop a climate action plan. And here, let me just disclose that I'm on the board at Sustainable Princeton, and they coordinated that plan. So I just want to be clear about I have that hat as well. And the schools made a commitment to be part of the implementation of the plan. And I know we're doing some things. We have some good work that will happen in the elementary schools, hopefully over the summer, and changing out our lighting to primarily LEDs. I know we have to do a roof audit before we can have robust conversations about solar, but sustainability is a very large area where we lag in our community. We're well behind most of our institutions. We're well behind most of the independent schools, and we're behind the municipality. So I'd like to request a consideration be given in the budget to making sustainability a higher priority.
Okay. Yeah, and Valerie has been coordinating our efforts with regard to that. In fact, she just attended a meeting of, I don't know if it was with your board, Brian, or a group of community agencies that are dealing with sustainability. I think it happened about a week ago. I'm trying to remember the exact date.
The Oasis group.
Was
Right.
it the Oasis? Okay, yes. That probably was about 10 days ago, wasn't it? Somewhere in that area. Matt, were you on that call too?
No, Valerie was on that call.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I didn't know whether. So, and so I think the district is committed to sustainability, and I think once we get back in session in school, I think in order to achieve the goals that you would like to see as a board, there has to be in each school people who want to take on that responsibility of working with their peers, their colleagues, and having a school-based approach to sustainability. I think there has to be a district-wide push for that, but I also believe that in order for it to work in buildings, there has to be someone there who takes that lead and is constantly teaching, evaluating, and helping kids understand how important sustainability is. But no, I don't disagree with that. I think it's a national concern, and I think Princeton or any school district should be doing its part with regard to sustainability. Matt, you want to comment?
No, I'm behind that 100%. I am taking meetings on solar, which can be combined with roof replacements. So I'm in the process of that. Hopefully soon at facilities, probably have some preliminary analysis on that. But it's a major. We are behind a lot of not only the community but other communities that I would view probably as less progressive than Princeton. So it's really important.
Debbie, you.
So agreeing with all that, but I also want to make sure in our budget that we are putting, as many dollars into our classrooms. But I know we've been talking a lot about our cost savings list, and I want to keep that kind of going in finance. I know that's not how you do a budget, but I just want to make sure we're still focusing that way. One thing for understanding for me would really to be get a technology plan, because I'd love to know where those dollars are going. I mean, obviously we have the 5 years of paying for the computers. So that's part of the technology budget next year, but like what else? That's something I'm kind of looking for. Another thing is, and this goes into the detail, we had in the past given, money to each school. And we've talked a lot about maybe some more of those expenses moving to PTOs and not being the district concern. So just something else to throw out. On the other side, I would love us to start up like the revenue ad hoc committee again. Valerie's been doing amazing work and allowing us to get all these different and new programs. We also have a lot of wonderful community partners. Obviously this past year, the focus was on just getting kids into class. I get that. But as we turn the corner, I want all those summer programs, but I also want to make sure that we don't overtax everybody. And I want to make sure that, Valerie's going to be able to find a bunch. Hopefully we'll get some more cares, but, really smart purchasing, smart planning, and, seeing kind of what some of our community members can do. I'm not, I'm for all the other stuff, but you guys already talked about it, so I don't have to bring it up again. But, but I also want to make sure we're paying attention on the revenue side to see what else we can bring in and not just, taxing everybody. We are having one of our, referendums, come off, and we need to be smart what we're going to do. Is that going to be part of maybe a roof something, or are we going to be able to move that in? But I would really love us to work more on the revenue ad hoc side and things like that.
Well, on the facility side and the referendum side, Deb, Susan's been the board liaison with, we're working with the old M&M group. I'm trying to remember the new name, Matt, if you can remind me of that. I can't remember the name now, but.
SLR.
Say it again, Matt.
SLR.
That's it, SLR. M&M was sold to SLR, so
You're
that's.
kidding. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyhow, I would think over the next month, the board will hear a presentation with regard to elementary schools, middle school, and the high school on what they're projecting as short-term and long-term needs. We spent 2.5 hours with them last week. Matt and I have a call scheduled in the next day or so with one of the principals to kind of put them into a better track about what the board paid for and what the board would like to see, and the timeline that they get this done. So at that point, I think then you can talk about what your short-term needs are, long-term needs, and your referendum, in 2 years where you lose X number of dollars off the referendum cost. And then you could start to think about what you want to do with your facilities. So I think that's going to become very apparent, and the board, it should provide for a couple interesting evenings of conversation with regard to their recommendations. I don't know, Susan, if you want to add something to that. I don't want to be nebulous, but since we're giving them all kinds of direction, I didn't want to be specific either.
Yeah, I think Barry and Matt are going to kind of direct them to how to present some information, some suggestions to us, and to tier those suggestions into, what we might need right now and what we might need in our back pocket for the future. And how it affects elementary, middle, and high school. And then that'll be, how the board works that into when our old number comes off, and what amount of that we want to put toward our schools. But yes, I think it will lead to a lot of robust conversation, is correct. But Barry and Matt, I think, still have some, directing to do to M&M to kind of get it in a way that I think will meet what the board has said our district's needs are. So a little more work to do on that. And then also, as we know in our last meeting, Matt on boring facilities because we want to keep money focused on schools, but there are some projects that, you know, Matt is having bid out and that the board will have to decide how, you know, Matt will have to present how in the budget that fits in, because some of those are projects that need to be addressed before we would look at an SLR plan that they would present to us. So, you know, I would add that to the prioritization, like, and I agree a lot with Betsy. I think a lot of kids, while we need a very robust summer program, we all agree, but I also think there's going to be some kids that are just like, I can't do this summer. I can't still be, if it's can't be as much in person as we'd like. And so having that robust fall where we're focused, and it might take some extra funding to get those kids back up to speed. You know, at some point, I guess doing some kind of survey, like how many parents are really interested in pursuing that summer school, obviously convincing those parents of kids most at risk. But I also think some kids are just counting the days till this ends right now. And hopefully that when they come back in the fall, it'll look at least somewhat different. So I think not ignoring, we may not even know how we want to spend that money, but making sure that we have funds available in the fall to provide extra supports for kids, for those that may not choose or just even be ready to participate in summer remediation. I think fall remediation will still be fall and to a lesser extent spring. So I think it's important to keep that money aside, and obviously balancing what we want to say is mundane issues, but if you let them fall, we wind up throwing bad money after them, keeping our facilities in as good enough shape so that our kids and our teachers are healthy, that we're adjusting to whatever new COVID, things might come up, and that we're keeping our buildings, clean and up to date. So we're not dealing with things like mold and not dealing, with correcting leaks rather than fixing the source of the leaks, and just making sure we have that money while not affecting, what's happening in our classrooms.
Thanks, Susan.
Jean wanted to go next, I think.
Jean?
Thanks. I wanted to thank my colleagues for all the thoughtful input. I agree with everything that was said. I wanted to thank Barry for the letter that you sent to the governor about prioritizing teachers for vaccination and working with the administration so well to ensure that our schools stay open and we can have more in-person instruction. In addition to facilities needs, short and long term, I was wondering, since this is my first go around with the budget, how curricula review fits in. I'd love to see, money set aside for results of the special education audit. I'd love to see history and civics curricula be reviewed. And I know that math is undergoing a current review with Bob. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Dan? Dan, you're on mute.
Thank you. One of the inventors of the Pfizer vaccine talked about COVID being around for 10 years, which is a frightening thought, or really making the point would be talking about it, hopefully not, maybe more in the way of the flu as opposed to something as virulent as it presently is. But it leads me to a conversation about outdoor versus indoor space and reimagining our outdoor space in a semi-permanent / permanent way. And I know we had talked about this in the spring, and there was some trouble with the supply of tents. But making the outdoor space maybe with sides, warm enough to use in colder weather, maybe having some heating capabilities, ability to use technology, Wi-Fi, computers, and all that. So I think that, and I hope we can really talk more about, a semi-permanent approach to outdoor space not only for sports and club activities, but for academic activities. Because it is inherently safer. I mean, you get better ventilation and you can put more people in a smaller environment. And I think certainly with tenting and heaters, you can use that space, hopefully, 12 months a year. So I think that maybe our original mission to M&M was pre-COVID. And so, I really want to understand from the administration what the vision is for outdoor space for 3-5 years, because I think that it's going to become an important part of virus control, going forward.
Yeah, it's really a good idea, and I think we're going to have a conversation with the town and talk about the uniform code and see whether or not we can potentially do what restaurants have done and reimagined their outdoor spaces. I saw last night in Manayunk, Philadelphia. I mean, it's a snowstorm, and I forget the name of it, but it was a very robust business, and they reimagined how to do that. So it may well be in the best interest of the board, especially with CARES money that's coming out, and I'm not sure of the package yet, but there may be an opportunity for you to look at some permanent outside structures that can always be used. I mean, these are things that can always be used. There are some rules and regulations with regard to the code for academic classrooms and so forth and so on. I think a couple things, Dan. I think maybe this country's going to go through I'm hoping they go through a rethink. New Jersey is so prescriptive with regard to schools and what you can do as compared to our neighbor Pennsylvania, for example. They need to reimagine what they're doing, from structures to how we provide education and so forth and so on. And then the towns also need to be, need to rethink codes and so forth and so on, so that we can be more flexible, fluid, and more adaptable to a world that's changed. I think COVID has changed the world forever. And I think now we have to be able to be more nimble and be more fluid, and we have to do things from a common sense standpoint, and not necessarily from a statute or municipal ordinance issues. I think people are going to have to start rethinking how to make this work for kids and for communities. And I think your idea is a good one. I mean, I think outside structures are going to be part of what you do in the future.
I appreciate that. I actually have a few points. I appreciate everything my colleagues have brought up, and the fact that we're having this discussion at the beginning of our budget process, which I think is somewhat new for this board, that we're not just doing goal setting. Unfortunately, it's been a strange year and we haven't had our regular goal setting cycle. So we're having this conversation now in a way that kind of is a semi goal setting, but also kind of just showing where we are and how we're all thinking to make sure we're aligned as we set the budget. And I've been checking off my issues as my colleagues have spoken. And one thing more I want to say, I appreciate that we're talking about how we're educating children right now and how we're going to do it, what we're going to do in the summer. And then when we talk about the fall, I also want to add the lens of, what have we learned and how are we not going to backslide into just doing school the same way? And I know some of us have been hearing people talk around the state how a lot of the ways that we're adjusting to the pandemic have been done because of executive order by the governor, but they haven't changed the statutes. And so I think in the fall, there's going to be all this kind of issue about how much do we need to keep having options of virtual school? Like, are we going to keep permanently some virtual school? Is that always going to be an element of what we offer in the future? Is there going to have to be legislative change for that? I mean, that's not a budget issue for us, but we need to keep that in mind. But as a district, how do we take advantage of what we've learned and incorporate that and move forward and not slide back? So I hope that when we think about the fall and we're planning for that, we kind of keep that element about moving forward and changing how we do school. And then I'd also like to make sure that in the budget, we continue to focus on student wellness. And that obviously has always been on all of our minds, but in the specifically, we've been participating in the Challenge Success now for, I think, 5 years. And we are due for another round. And I know that takes some investment in budget and time to make sure that we're not losing the benefit of that kind of cycle of data that we have, because our new superintendent and the board, I hope, will be coming up with more specific measurable metrics so that we know how we're doing. And I think the Challenge Success has been a keystone to how we've made changes in the high school to try to help our students in terms of schedule and their well-being in their classes. And in that also, we have wellness teams in all of our schools. We have green teams in all of our schools. We've created policies that are very detailed. We thought about these things before, but we kind of set it up and then, somehow it may get lost in the implementation. And so hopefully we can continue to figure out whether that system still works well for us and make sure we have adequate funding for it. And also, when we think about academic integrity, that's a piece that came out through the Challenge Success. And I want to just say that I think it's important we keep that as something we need to deal with in the next year. So those are things that were on my list, and I appreciate your listening and taking our input at this point.
Would you, I'm sorry, I see in the chat.
Brian had one more point.
Brian has another point.
Well, it's a question and a request. The question is, I think for Matt, as you present the budget, can you also, show us where you think we're going to end up? I know Dan has made this request too with fund balance and capital reserve, making, some assumptions about the amount we may need to supplement the referendum proceeds to address some of the emergency repairs that have been identified. We're adding in surplus, but there are a number of calls on that. So it'd just be very helpful for all of us to get a clear sense of what you're forecasting for fund balance and maintenance reserve. And the second is a request, and we've talked about it, but it hasn't been mentioned in public in this meeting, so please allow me to. We know there are inflationary pressures. We know that much of the compensation is driven by contracts, but we also, at least I'm hopeful that in a year where you've begun to implement zero-based budgeting, that we can have the conversation about whether it would be possible to tax at a rate less than the maximum permitted by the state. And I know that 0.5% is on the order of $450,000 or $500,000, which is a lot of money. But I hope that some consideration can be given to the question of whether we can deliver the high quality educational experience and services that we're obligated to provide with a tax increase something less than the maximum permitted.
Those are very good points and very good points and questions. It goes to a healthy school district budget is based on managing your recurring expenses wisely, and salaries and benefits are by far the two biggest components of that. So it's extremely important. I think one of the things that I've maybe educated some people on are that if we don't use the up to the levy, that it does sit there for up to 3 more budget years. So it can be you can be a little more aggressive in that sense. The only thing you lose is the compounding. If my memory is correct, about 400,000 that we left on the table last year. It was I have to look it up, but anyway, so you just lose the compounding, the 2% on that, which is about $8,000. So it's not tragic to a budget. And I think about this stuff all the time, and unfortunately it wakes me up at night, and sometimes, not every night. And I view it, so you guys as a community and as a school district have done a tremendous amount of service to the community by maintaining low class sizes. So in many ways, I try to look at things, especially Mike and I with personnel requests, almost in a zero sum game. What are you willing? We did start this last year. What do you give up something to get something? It can't happen in all cases. It can't happen in a rising enrollment environment, as you guys had gone through, in the previous, let's say, 5 to 6 years, if you want to maintain class size. So I think about this stuff a lot. One of the, I don't know if you want to segue into talking about, some of the preliminary results of the current year.
Yeah, I think if the board is, I think it may generate a few more questions, but Matt, if you could put up your analysis that you did, I mean, I think it would be pretty informative for the board to take a snapshot today. And remember my opening comments, this is a snapshot on about 70% of the budget. Unfortunately, Matt was working on it when System 3000 crashed, or we would have had a 100% snapshot for you tonight. But this is a snapshot of where he thinks we'll be based on about 70% of analysis.
I think I was going to speak about the numbers. It gets a little bit, this historical prospective model, there's a lot of data on there.
Yeah.
Do we want to do this in open or closed? Are we getting into closed potentially or not?
Just talking about preliminary results where we've seen some savings, and then challenges going into into setting the budget in the next 6 weeks comes up fast. So if you guys, you go with me, I think it's a lot to share this giant spreadsheet.
Okay, you want to
have it right here. I'm just going to speak about some of the high points.
Oh yeah, why don't you just do that? Why don't you just highlight the piece, and we could always send this out as a preliminary number.
Yeah, I'll circulate it out as a draft.
Yeah, and we could put that on the Brass Tacks Friday, or we could send it out tomorrow. It doesn't make any difference.
Right, as Barry said. So I spent a lot of time on Saturday. I was here most of the day and analyzing salaries. So we have had about $1.2 million variance, positive budget variance with salaries, COVID related. For the vast extended year program, we spent significantly less. So this budget cycle covered last summer's program. As we know, it wasn't as hardy. So, in that decision process, I mean, you'll hear me mention it again and again, non-recurring, we want to use some of that towards this summer this program and augment it as best possible. We've had savings and projected. So I analyzed the payroll, I pulled it into a spreadsheet, and I forecast going out, trying to add in any new positions, such as the HVAC tech we just hired, and other types of things like that, come up with proposed. So really the savings on the salary side are all COVID related. Substitutes are down significantly. We're having trouble finding them. We're using aides where we can, which are already on the payroll. That's about 200,000 to date. Some other summer home instruction is down. We're doing it more virtually. Duty pay has all but vanished so far this year. Down slightly on some of the EPES and stipends. Transportation salary expenses are down significantly compared to the budget. Overtime is down and projected to be down. And we have money in the right. You guys have done a nice job, as a community. And there's tutoring and other CST charges in the budget as part of the regular general fund budget that not everywhere has that. That's down. So salaries are projecting right now a positive budget variance of about $1.2 million. Of course, that depends on what we roll out, over the next 5 months. We're just about, I don't think we've hit the 100th day. We're just a little over 90 days now.
Yeah.
Something like that. So we're about halfway through the school year. Hopefully we'll be able to roll out some aggressive programs come the spring so we can use those funds. As I've said over and over again, we're not here to make money and bank it. We're here to better our children's education in the community. So, I think we hit on, I took very good notes from all the things. It really aligns with administration's budget priorities. As I just talked about, I try to view things as a zero-sum game, increase taxes as little as possible, and maximizing the dollars we're spending. I mean, from a financial perspective, that's my main goal. Budgeting responsibly, increasing efficiencies in purchasing, and then. But so one of the budget challenges that we're going to have this year on the revenue side is we've had declining Cranberry enrollments, which are good for capacity, but it does hurt the budget. So we do a reconciliation each year between the two districts. And as I told you guys, I had a past knowledge of their BA, so we get along great and we talk all the time. But so almost 400,000 of a negative. It looks like those, we're not set yet on these numbers, but about a $400,000 reconciliation for the fiscal 20 year that just ended. We received, I should say, certified tuition rates from the state that were lower than were budgeted. And that's about 105,000, and then about 290,000. So we ended up at 251 students. So if a student comes in and then moves out of town after 90 days, like about where we are now, then we get the credit for half the student for the year. So we're down about 16 students, and that accounts for another 290. So it's just under 400,000 that we have to reconcile, and that affects the 21-22 budget. On top of that, there is overall declining enrollment. In fiscal 17, we had ended up at 276 from Cranberry, 280 the next, 271, 251 this year that just ended, and then we're at about 239 right now. So that does hurt the budget. We'll probably be budgeting somewhere around $19,000 per student. You know, we try to hit it. Been working closely with Cranberry. So as I've talked to finance about in the past, the swings in that part of the budget hurts them because it's a larger percentage of their budget, but it is significant to us. So year over year, we have a shortfall in revenues compared to the prior year. Now, the prior year was somewhat of an aberration. So there was a bunch of enrollments were coming off of their peaks, and we were going back and doing a thorough analysis of resource costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be a challenge to make up, you know, somewhere close to $1 million on that piece of the budget. So that's one of the challenges we face. Not insurmountable. We're going to work through that. You know, right now, we should end this year on a positive, you know, less expenses than revenues. But like I said, depending on how quickly we can roll out some of these programs to augment learning loss, et cetera, there's always variables. As I've told you guys before, we're self-insured on the RX side. I've been analyzing that. We're doing well on our benefits. We had preliminary budget meeting with our benefits brokers. That's looking good. So that's going to help for the next year. What I haven't been able to analyze yet, and as I've said before, we've talked about this, it's very difficult to, it's made it even more difficult for me being new to the district, but difficult to see the supply purchasing in the COVID world. You know, we clearly were down last year in expenses. I've been pulling down some of the other CAFRs as they come out. They're due this Friday. So every school district's supposed to post the wonderful CAFR that only boring CPAs, although I was told recently by someone here that I wasn't a boring CPA, which I took as a great compliment. You can pull down every CAFR in the state. And I did notice that some of our peers had very similar COVID results than we did, outsized profit, for lack of a better word. It's not really profit, just a deficit in expenditures or an excess of revenues, however we want to look at it. So that's kind of a top view of kind of where we're looking to balance the budget. And we've been working already analyzing personnel requests here at Central Administration, analyzing the supply requests and drilling down on how people spend their money. that's kind of a top level view of where we sit right now as we gather towards. So the other factor, state aid isn't a huge percentage of our budget. I mean, I'm forecasting maybe they're going to decrease it 5%. There's going to be a COVID effect because the state aid we receive here is not the equalization aid that they use to adjust for a community that is more in need. But we get like a per pupil, the biggest one is special education aid, categorical special education aid. So with our COVID numbers being down, that could affect us. The governor will be giving his budget address on the 23rd, which is 3 weeks from today. And then by law, he has to put out the state aid numbers by 48 hours. So it's usually that Thursday morning or sometimes a little later. That's kind of where we're sitting right now. That's
So
really
Matt, we
what
don't
I'll talk about.
obviously need this now, but last year, the net effect that we added was we added 3 million to surplus due to COVID related savings. So, it'd be great, before we get too deep in the budget cycle to have a net number, so we know that what we're working with. But
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm gonna work on trying to tighten down that estimate. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Matt, I didn't quite follow you on the Cranberry numbers. I know that obviously revenues follow Cranberry enrollment. There's 19,000 per child or per student, the tuition that they pay us. So I know that Cranberry numbers are going down and projected to go down next year and the year after that. And then I think they may start coming up again after that a little bit, but I didn't understand. So we're down and you have half of each year in the budget, right? Because it spans 2 calendar years. So you're saying next year we're going to be down 400,000, or was that this year due to Cranberry?
We have the same budget year. It's just a matter of the reconciliation is kind of a prospective reconciliation. So it's really a 2-year lag in some ways, right? So we finally get the certified tuition rates from the state. We get those in January, and that relates to fiscal 20. We're in fiscal 21, and then we adjust both based on the certified tuition rate that they paid us, because we estimate that number. And then based on the fiscal 20 average daily enrollment for Cranberry students, which was also 16 students left. So that almost 400,000 gets given back. In the past, it had kind of gone the other way sometimes in recent years, and it was a strain on their budgeting. This, we want to try to be as close as possible. It's a very difficult thing to predict with certainty. So it's a prospective reconciliation so that in the end, we receive what we should have and they pay what they should have.
We know next year there'll be less Cranberry students, so we have less to spend.
Yes,
right.
The marginal effect, and we talked about this. So it's both sides of the coin, right? That marginal effect is quite a bit based on the decrease in those students. So it does have a budgetary effect.
But it's several 100,000, right?
Yeah, it's year over year. Mm-hmm.
That's a big number.
It is a big number, and it's.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I have 5 follow-up questions. The first, just to clarify, Dan referenced $3 million of savings last year as COVID related. And my recollection is that a little more than 1 million was COVID related and the balance was not COVID related. Which is it?
I would have to, I would think it was a little more than 1 million the other way. I was, I haven't analyzed it to the granular level, determining, which was COVID and which wasn't. But I would say it would be more closer to probably 2 million COVID, and then reaping some of the benefits of the RIF that went in the spring of 2019.
Okay, and then the 1.2 million of salaries. Did you say that was year to date, or was that the projection for the full year?
I'm projecting it out based on,
need.
what I've seen through the first 7 months. So through January 30th, the most very recent payroll I've put into my spreadsheet, analyzed, trying to take into different concerns and estimates, I should say, not concerns, and prorating that out through the last 10 pays of the year.
Okay, and you mentioned that those were non-recurring. So I guess that it's important for us to understand.
Yeah, big picture. Yeah, they're really COVID related reductions in salaries for the most part.
Two other questions. With respect to state aid, I know the calculation is not a simple one, but we ended last year with a student population, I think it was just below 4,000. And right now we have about 3,700. So to the extent that our state aid is determined by the number of students at the 3 different school levels, have you factored that difference into your estimate?
Yeah, we're down about 150 students year over year. The October 15th count, which gets formalized in the beginning of December, finalized, I should say, and formalized. I could go in and look and compare the special ed population, because that'll be the biggest effect on that, but it will affect, I guess, if the dollar stayed the same throughout the state, so it would depend on what percentage of students we lost compared to the rest of the state on average.
Okay, and the last question I had was with respect to the estimate you'll make for extraordinary aid for special education, which we usually learn about in July. Over the last 2 years, Governor Murphy and Senate Majority Leader Sweeney have actually agreed on continuing to push that amount up. And Governor Sweeney recently has been quoted about talking about over a 4 or 5 year period, trying to get the full state funding formula into place, which if it were in place, I think would bring us another $1 million. And every few percent of the extraordinary aid for special education is a meaningful amount. So are you budgeting conservatively, using the recent numbers or numbers that are less than the recent numbers? I was wondering how you're thinking about that.
Yeah,
both the categorical aid, which you estimated is 5% less, and then the school funding formula, and then also the extraordinary aid for special ed.
Yeah, the extraordinary aid, I spent an awful lot of time last year pre-budget, basically did a dry run, and we came in really close actually to my February analysis. And I wanted to get a number that I thought would be, attainable or reasonably, since it's a grant that you get back after you've incurred the expenses based on those expenses, it's going to vary significantly year to year in what we submitted. I wasn't sure if Barry and I sent that out. I did a preliminary analysis on this new bill. There's a Senate bill and a corresponding Assembly bill, which would phase it in. I think it was 65%, 80, and then up to 100 in only 3 years, I think, which would be significantly additive for us, as a lot of other school districts. It's not an inconsequential amount of money, right? So if they funded us about 58.9%, I think, this year. Then they added on a little extra, but that's because they found money somewhere. So to bring it up to based on the state budget number of like $250 million. So it's not insurmountable that they could find, that kind of sum in the budget. We know Murphy's been pro-education. So, but I'm going to hold that tight unless we learned about this, unless the legislation was passed.
Can we just give context to this conversation that don't we ask the state every year for our extraordinary special aid request is around 3 million?
I mean, it depends on it was just over $3 million this past year.
Normally the state under law is supposed to give us 100% of that because it's what we pay above a certain amount for students we send out of district. And in the past, the state has typically only funded 40 or 52% of that. And then they went up to 56%. So we got more than we thought, and we don't necessarily budget. We budget for that too, but so we're talking about, we're already like $1.5 million short from the state.
It's a moving target to budget for because of that. It was declining over the years significantly. It dropped down to just over 50% 2 years ago. Then it came back on the upswing with Governor Murphy. He added that to some money to that in this second budget address, I believe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Matt, for that. And I guess we're going to see next Tuesday is when you come to us with the preliminary budget for the workshop, which also be a public session on 7 o'clock, right, on Tuesday.
That one is at 7, yes.
Yeah.
Matt, just when you bring you and Barry are asking us to approve that budget for submittal to the state, which is not a final approval.
No.
That's on March 16th.
Okay, so this is just the presentation, the workshop. We're not taking any action.
It's the early top level view. Last year, there wasn't a lot of details. I'm going to have, I think, some more details this year, a little earlier.
And
that's March 16th is a tentative budget.
Last year, we did it in the parking lot on March 16th.
We did.
What was the infamous quote? Board members in the dark?
Yeah.
I think one of our attendees on the Zoom call was with us, wasn't he?
Dr. Carell, you're right.
Yes.
With his lawn chair.
He was.
His launch chair, yes, that was.
When I was driving to Chicago, my 12 hours there.
So again, tonight we're kind of talking with you about our priorities as a board before you come to us with the preliminary budget that we'll talk about next week in the workshop, which will then come to us. You'll then go back and work on it some more, and you'll come back to us on the 16th of March for us to approve for submission to the county, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it goes? And then the county does it, and then we approve the final, by law, we have to approve the final budget. I don't know, March 30th, is that when we do it?
This year? No. It would be April 27th.
All right.
There's a tight window last year, if you remember. We did Kanter week and we barely got it advertised, but we did get it advertised. I guess Barry and I and the board leadership, we could have so we'll be talking about in committees, right? Heavily in the operations committee coming up in February. We may have some more discussion on the 23rd. Of February, leading into it's due to this date, the Friday after the 16th. So it'll be March 20th this year.
Well, I think we all appreciate your making time for us to give you this input. I know we've been just feeling that as a governance matter, it was really important that we have this session, and it's one more night, but we're grateful that you guys made the time for it. Is there anything else that people wanted to say about this or that we need to go over on the budget?
I'm sorry, did you?
I just wanted to say we have members of the public, so I know we were going to have a public comment period as well.
Oh yeah, that's next.
You guys want to jump into that now? Let me see if anyone out there.
Yeah, and if we have members of the public and if you want to speak, please give us your name and your address so we can confirm, who's there. And we ask that you keep to 3 minutes, and it's not a Q&A, it's a time to make comments, and we welcome hearing from you.
I don't see any questions.
So,
okay. Did Brian?
I have one budget related question related to compensation that I think would be a closed topic, which I can hold for next week.
Okay.
Michelle had a question, I think.
Michelle? No. So if we don't have a close, do we have a need to go into closed session with this group, Barry?
no, not unless you wanted to talk about personnel, salaries, or benefits, which Brian has indicated. That was one of his questions that I'm looking on my screen. If he wants to wait till next week when we make the budget presentation and have, we'll have a complete analysis of where we think we're going to be at 100% of the budget. Matt will have that along with our preliminary budget. And we probably can go to executive session there and talk a little bit about salaries and benefits based on what we are budgeting.
And you also mentioned you might be able to come back and do some of the reorganization discussion.
Correct. If we could potentially do that, and I would like about a half hour of your time just to talk a little bit about and how it relates to how the personnel relates to the budget and the potential, how the dollars would work with regard to a reorganization and how that would affect your budget.
And that would work well to do next week for you on Tuesday?
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, it would be excellent.
Is that okay with the board? Okay, that sounds good.
Is that following the public meeting then? Or prior to the public meeting?
We would have I'm sorry, say that again.
I just didn't know, would the close be at prior to the public meeting or at the end? We would make the budget presentation and then we would go into executive session to talk about the financial side with regard to salaries and benefits.
So we would do it as we'd adjourn to closed, and then you could do the reorg piece and all the
reorganization, because it also has to do with salary and benefits.
Okay, makes sense. All right, then I would suggest then the idea tonight was we are going to adjourn into another closed session so we can continue to talk about superintendent search. Are we ready to do that? I think Betsy's given us a separate Zoom. And is it the Zoom that's coming up from Matt, or is it the Zoom that's been circulated by Betsy?
That's my question.
Okay, so Matt had sent out a Zoom. I think we thought there was a closed session in between. So if we're skipping over that, go to mine, which I'll look to see when I sent that out. That was yesterday at some point.
Do we get a 3-minute break in between?
Yes, I think we need to have a motion to adjourn to close. And okay, I've got Dafna and Jean. And before I take the vote, I'm just going to say that could we make that motion to adjourn at 7:30? Could we come back at 7:35 or 7:35? Is that enough time? Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn to close from Dafna, second Jean. Everyone in favor of that? Okay, that's carried. Matt, Dafna, are you in favor? Yes, unanimous.
And there will be no action taken, and you will adjourn from closed session.
Correct, and we'll mark the time for you for the minutes. So right now we are going to adjourn to close. Thank you to the members of the public who joined us tonight. We're going into close now. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, Mike, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome.
Bob.
Thank you, Matt. Good job.
Thank you, Matt. That was great.
Thank you, Matt.